And hi, everybody. Mike Smedley here. Thanks so much for joining us for Great Alternatives to Kentucky Bluegrass presentation. It's been updated, and we appreciate you being here. Today, we're just going to take a brief look at the good, the bad, and the ugly about Kentucky Bluegrass and different ways that we can reduce the use of this invasive turf, as well as look at some inspirations. Let's dig right into it, shall we? Kentucky bluegrass is interesting in the fact that, you know what, it's not from Kentucky. It was brought here by settlers in the 1600s and 1700s as a pasture grass. It's also not blue. It's very, very green, which is why people use quite a bit of it. But to its credit, it definitely is a grass. So 1 out of 3, that's pretty good, right? If you took Kentucky bluegrass and mapped out where it is in the United States, you'd come up with this satellite map. And this shows you these green areas where turf is growing all over the place. It's the largest irrigated crop in America, and it takes up about 2% of our total land mass. That's pretty significant. And if you took all of these green areas where grass is growing in metropolitan areas and put them all in one place, it would cover the entire state of Georgia. Wow, that's a lot of grass. And the sad part about it is, being the largest irrigated crop in the United States, we pretty much waste the harvest. We, on a weekly basis, we cut it down, we bag it up, and then we toss it away. So it takes up a significant amount of summer landfills. And I think that's just kind of absurd of how we spend so much time and effort to raise this crop that we never use. There are some good points to Kentucky bluegrass. In fact, it's a superior surface for kids and for pets. If you're hanging out, having picnics, nothing is better than Kentucky bluegrass. But that being said, it's used for those purposes. If you're just using Kentucky bluegrass just to fill space, that's where the problem occurs. But if you have kids and pets, nothing's better than Kentucky bluegrass. The same goes for sports fields. For football, for baseball, badminton, all these things, soccer, it is great for sports, and that's because it repairs itself. It grows quickly, and it's a forgiving surface for contact sports. So, thumbs up for the good if you have a ball field or you're using it for athletic purposes. And likewise, if you're a municipality and you have a park where a lot of people gather, it takes a lot of wear and tear, nothing is better than bluegrass for turfing these heavily used areas. Because again, they can repair themselves. It's pretty, it's cool, it's great to sit on. So yeah, for parks that are used, hey, I think that's great. However, there's a dark side to Kentucky bluegrass, and let's go into it. The first one is that it uses a ton of gasoline to maintain. 800 million gallons of gas is burned every year just to trim the lawn. That's pretty darn significant. Also, when people refuel their machines, they're not very good at it. They spill a ton of gas, and it amounts to the equivalent of an Exxon Valdez disaster. That was the oil spill up in Alaska. Every year, 17 million gallons of gas are spilled. That's significant. And also, just because of our lawn mowing and our leaf blowers and the other thing that we use for outdoor power equipment, it uses two-stroke engines. They are notoriously inefficient, and they contribute to a significant amount of air pollution. So those are the bad things that are about it. But there's something even worse to grass, and that is, here as gardeners, we don't do a very good job of stewardship. We apply way too many pesticides. We apply way too many herbicides, and then we want to make it grow better and do a prodigious amount of fertilizer that's on our grasses. And so the fact is, we use 10 times more than farmers do to grow this particular crop. And the ironic part about this is that once we apply all these chemicals to create these nice spaces that which we gather, we have to put these warning signs to say keep off the lawn because it's got all these dangerous chemicals on it. I think that's absurd. But let me just point out, regardless of water or chemicals or all this other stuff, it's your time and money. And that is, you're going to be spending about 10 weeks of paid vacation in your life mowing the lawn. And that to me is a significant amount. I've got better things to do with my time than that. It also costs a ton of money. $500 is the average spend to keep lawns in good shape and in green. And I'm thinking, man, that $500 could produce or could buy a lot of great xeric plants and shrubs that would be growing in place of this lawn that you have to mow every week. Just saying, it just takes a lot of time and effort. Water is the main thing on here. Grass is a water hog, and water is something that we don't have a lot of, and we're going to have a lot less of. The U.S. uses 9 billion gallons of treated water every day, just on lawns, and half of that water is wasted. It's wasted in it sprinkles on sidewalks. It's on parking lots. It evaporates when you spray it into the air. Durango uses 1 million gallons a day in the summertime. Of course, half of that is wasted. More than half of our water use is for outside irrigation. And here's the dirty little secret number two, and that is the three biggest users of water, irrigated water, in Durango is the city of Durango, School District 9R, and the college. They like to keep large expanses of unused swaths of grass green, and nobody seems to use them except in select parks. So I'll get off my soapbox about that one. But grass does take a lot of water. So why does it take all this water? And that is there's two kinds of grasses out there, or turf grasses, I should say, either warm season grasses or cool season grasses. So here's a side-by-side picture. One is in mid-April, one is in mid-August. And in the mid-April picture, you'll see across the street this green expanse of grass, and those are cool season grasses in my neighbor's house. In front of my house, I've got buffalo grass, and so I planted a bunch of tulips and other bulbs in there just because I wanted something interesting while the buffalo grass is dormant. Warm season grasses aren't going to green up until about the middle to late end of May, depending on the weather. In the summertime, however, warm season grasses are in their green, verdant glory, and the cool season grasses go dormant and they're brown. That's why the hillsides around Durango all have that tawny color to it, because the natural grasses there are just sleeping until the monsoons hit, or you can get some rain in October, November, and waiting for snowfall to occur. So that's the situation between turf grasses. You either get warm grasses or cool season grasses, and they have different growth cycles. So let me illustrate why this is important. So we'll call on our good friend Patione Calades to demonstrate the water conundrum. What we got here is two different measurements. So Panioti's there in his garden, and if you measure from his feet up to his knees, that's about 19 inches, okay? If you go from the bottom of his feet up to about his eyes, that's going to be 44 inches. And why are these two measurements significant? Well, let's look at that right now. Kentucky bluegrass requires, not just would like, but requires 44 inches of moisture, a depth of 44 inches of moisture every year just to remain green. And because you're trying to trick it to think that it's springtime year round, that's why you have to water it a ton. Now, Durango, naturally, on a good year, probably gets about 19 inches of moisture. Most of that falls in the wintertime, so we have pretty dry summers. So you're thinking, wow, that is an incredible deficit. Where do you think that deficit is going to come from? It's either stored water that you're going to have to pay for or water that's not coming. We rely on snowfall, and, snowfall can be really sketchy. So it's not guaranteed. And what we're doing is we're planting this ground cover that not only it needs, the minute that it's planted, it's an intensive care unit, and it requires more chemicals than the Rolling Stones on a world tour. This is just absolutely not sustainable. So if you do the math, it doesn't take an Einstein to figure out that planting Kentucky bluegrass in a semi-arid place like Durango, Colorado, is not particularly a good idea. What do we do about this stuff? Got three things. We can rethink our relationship with turf grasses. We can reduce the amount of Kentucky bluegrass that we have, or we can just outright replace it. So let's look at that right now. The question is, have we evolved? That is the question that Charles Darwin asks. And the answer is not. We can train monkeys to mow our grass. And what we've been doing for the past, I don't know what, 150, 200 years is that we are taking our turf grass and we don't actually change things. We just invent new tools and new pieces of machinery to do the exact same thing of cutting it, when actually we shouldn't be doing that. We haven't evolved. And so, you know, Charles Darwin wrote a book about it. And sorry to say that as gardeners, we've been failing the test on this. Part of the problem too is that there's a ton of people out there, and I'm sorry if I insult people, but there are folks that are just have this fetish about closely cropped lawn. It's got to be emerald green, and it needs to be controlled all the time. So the whole point about this is for folks like that, that's more of a psychological problem than a horticultural one. That's not going to be solved through our conference today. But Sigmund Freud had a thing or two to say about that. If you want to rethink your turf, rethink it. Two easy ways that doesn't require a ton of effort. The first one is please don't mow it so closely. A closely cropped lawn is susceptible to burning. It's susceptible to a lot of insect infestation. It's just not healthy to keep it at 1.5 inches or more like a golf course kind of thing. If you keep it at 3 inches, it's going to be greener. It's going to be healthier. You're going to have to mow it less. You're going to have to apply less chemicals. So that's a great way to rethink your turf. Is just don't crop it all the time. Now, even a more radical way to do stuff is just let your lawn go dormant. It'll do that naturally. That's what warm season grasses, or excuse me, that's what cool season grasses do when it turns warm. It just goes brown. And like I say, what we're doing while we're applying all this water is to fool our grasses to think that it's springtime all the time. That's where that 44 or more inches of moisture comes from. That being said, if you employ this dormancy strategy, be sure to water your trees. There is no such thing as a xeric deciduous tree. There's some oaks that come close, but it's important to protect our urban forestscapes. So water your trees. Let the lawn go. It'll green up. It'll be just fine. But make sure your trees are healthy and give them a drink at least on a week or two basis. Water deeply and infrequently is going to be the watchword on that one. So those are two easy ways to rethink your turf. The ludicrous way to rethink your turf is to paint it green. And yes, folks, there are companies that will come out and they will spray your dormant lawn green. It will fool nobody. In fact, you can even go to Home Depot and get this product over here if you want to do it as a do-it-yourself product. And I think this is just so funny. It's just designed the time to make your neighbors glare with jealousy because you've got a green lawn. Yeah, they know you painted it, and no, they're not going to be jealous. So, if that is how we rethink our lawns, two easy ways. If you want to get a little bit more effort into it, how about reducing your turf? The first part is just dig it out. And you can use machinery, you can use a fork, but the less lawn that you physically have means the less lawn that you have to water. So you can have more plants, more xeric plantings. It's actually going to be pretty. But if you do this, make sure that you reprogram or reconfigure your sprinklers because it's not going to save you any water if you cut the sides of the lawn, but keep the sprinklers on all the time. So yes, it does require a little bit more work, but it is very, very rewarding. Dig it out. The second way to reduce your Kentucky bluegrass is to solarize it. And what we mean by that is to use the harness the power of the sun to kill the grass. What you do is you water it, then you cover it with clear plastic. Use clear plastic, not black plastic. Clear will work a lot better. Trust me on that one. And if you have any questions, tons of websites out there can explain it. But you secure it down with boards or rocks or things like that. It takes about 4 to 8 weeks, but in that period of time, the temperature will rise. It will kill It will kill the grass. It'll kill some seeds. The microbes and stuff will go elsewhere. So, and the nice thing, once you can take that plastic off, you can plant right through it. So you don't have to, um, it's you're planting through the dead grass basically. So that's what solarizing is. That's an easy way to do things. And if you have a season to use, I've done this before. It's sheet mulch. So you spread, 8 to 10 pieces of newspaper across the lawn, or use cardboard, wet it down, and then cover it with a really good mulch. I prefer soil pep, but any mulch would do on that one. Water it in and just keep it in for the season. And underneath, it's going to smother your Kentucky bluegrass. Now, the nice thing about this is you can also plant right through this immediately. So if you're looking to eliminate grass, this is a great way to do it. Plus, the mulch looks pretty good. The way not to do this is to spread dangerous chemicals on there. Roundup has been shown to cause cancer. It's just a really bad thing. It breaks my heart every time I go into a big box store or a hardware store and see these row after row of dangerous poisonous chemicals that people think, well, it's perfectly fine to put on your in your garden. And the fact is not, please don't do that. Use these other three methods. It'll achieve the same thing. So if we need to replace our bluegrass lawn, let me throw out four alternative turf grasses for you. Each of them has a plus side and a downside, so let's just look right into them. The first one is the turf type tall fescue. Now, if you're looking for a prototypical bluegrass lawn, this is the turf for you. It needs to be mowed a little bit higher. It's a cool season grass, so that means it's going to be green all the time. So it does take a little bit more water, but maybe probably about half of what Kentucky bluegrass would do. I think its best attribute is that it'll grow in the shade. So if you want that classic lawn look, think about replacing your Kentucky bluegrass with tall type fescue grass. There's a ton of different kinds out there. You're probably going to have to grow it from seed. And so it will require a little bit of work. But if you're looking to save water, this is definitely a way to do it. It'll be your own little secret that no, it's not Kentucky bluegrass. A more radical approach would be to use the Colorado native grass, which is blue grama grass. If you've ever grown blind ambition, that's the type of grass that this is. So it's a bunch grass. It's a warm season grass. So it's not going to green up until later on in the season, but it's only going to take a third of the water of Kentucky bluegrass. You can see in this picture, it's taken from Colorado Springs. One side is mowed, so you can see what it looks like in a traditional turf. The other one is not mowed, so you can see there's the seed heads there. You could plant perennials and kind of create a meadow out of this. So there's a lot of options that you can have with Bouteloua, which would be the blue grama grass. So your choice, but I think it's a pretty good a, a pretty good strategy to have. Um, Plant Select has introduced dog tuft grass, and this is a grass from South America, very drought tolerant. It has deep, deep roots. It too is a warm season grass. Now it's going to need full sun, but its advantages is that it's not going to brown up with dog pee. It self repairs much like Kentucky bluegrass. So it's a great it's a great surface for dogs and playing and that type of stuff. It is a sterile hybrid, but it does spread. So just be aware. You can order this, and it really is a good one. I know there's a couple of yards here locally that have converted to dog tuft grass. And for me, my turf choice is buffalo grass. This is a native. It comes from the Great Plains, the lower Great Plains, the shortgrass prairie. And here you see it winter, spring, and summer. So I'm really pushing it. It doesn't grow much above 6,500 feet, and you need to plant it by plugs. That being said, it is extremely drought tolerant. And I water my lawn maybe, oh, I don't know, 4 times a year. And that's just to keep it really, really green when it doesn't rain from July through the end of August like it does some years. I had ulterior motives with buffalo grass, and that is it's just not to provide, a turf surface. I wanted a foil for bulbs. And so buffalo grass is superior as a uh, as a grass surface that you can plant bulbs through. So in mid-March, there's this explosion of crocuses and snow irises. And then a month later in mid-April, you can see that's the tulip show that begins. So buffalo grass is unparalleled for being a friendly place for bulbs to grow, where other grasses with um, more aggressive roots, not so much. It would crowd them out. But anyway, I love bulbs. I planted 10,000 of them. I enjoy it every year, and it's not for everybody, but I think it's pretty darn cool. So say you don't want grass, you want ground covers instead. So here's four options for you. Just thought maybe you'd consider these. Two of them are what you'd be considered would be considered typical. Other two would be unusual. So the first one, let's talk about time for a second. So here's a shot, famous shot that High Country Gardens has of a client in Albuquerque that got rid of their bluegrass lawn and planted thyme there. Thyme's a great plant for large scale ground covers. It's in full sun or part shade. It's water wise. You don't mow it. The bees love it. And so it's something to consider. There's a bunch of different kinds of thymes out there, by the way. The one that you saw in that last picture is going to be pink chintz, but you can also get red creeping thyme. Woolly thyme is a little bit grayer, and it spreads pretty aggressively if you've ever grown it. I happen to love juniper leaf thyme just because the foliage is wonderful. And also, I just put down there's two elfin thymes. They're different species. They both call them elfin. That's just because it got really, really small leaves. They're good doers. But I think if you're going to be doing a larger scale lawn, pink chintz is probably going to be your best bet on something like that. If you love blue like I do, I just love Veronica. Veronica is a tremendous uh, uh, ground cover species. It's water wise. The bees are all over it. You don't have to mow it, and you're not going to get this kind of color from any other plant out there. There's a ton of different kinds of Veronicas. The one that you saw in the picture before is a Veronica luinensis, which is the Turkish Veronica. It's from Turkey, but it's actually kind of rare over there. But it's been brought to Colorado, where it's become one of the most successful ground covers and one of the most popular plants in the Plant Select program. But that being said, there's another one that's even more xeric that's called woolly Veronica, Veronica pectinata. And again, it has all these beautiful, beautiful flowers. It has a different shaped, sort of a serrated leaf on this particular species, as opposed to the Veronica luinensis, which has a glossy round leaf that turns red in the fall. So these are two great alternatives that you can have. But if you want something that's the best of both worlds, Crystal River Veronica was a hybrid between those two. It was a spontaneous hybrid that appeared at Denver Botanic Gardens, and it inherited the best traits of both species. And if you're looking for a white Veronica, the snowmass blue-eyed Veronica is not paralleled anyplace else. I do want to bring out the fact that there's two other Veronicas that are in the trade, that woolly Turkish Veronica or the Veronica oltensis, the thyme leaf Veronica. Both of these are fabulous plants, but they're suited to rock gardens because they're not going to grow in spread. They're going to be these real small little treasures. So put them in your rock garden, not in your front yard. So two unconventional ground covers to use as lawn replacements. Cotula. This is from South Africa. It's going to be a little bit higher because this comes from South Africa's only alpine ski resort. It's a ground cover that you find up there. And when it's in bloom with these little yellow buttons held on tall stems, it is a showstopper. People stop. What is that? They stop and say, "What is that stuff that you're growing?" Well, it's cotula. And so it's a neat ground cover. If it dies out, it'll bounce right back. So it's a fast spreader. So it can be a great alternative if you want to do something really, really unusual. If you don't like If you don't like the flower heads, you can always just mow them off because they're held on really tall stems. I think it's a great plant. Another one I'm just going to throw out there is Paronychia, silver nailwort. It's flat as a tortilla. Comes from the Pyrenees Mountains of Spain. It's green and it's or it should say it's evergreen, and it takes less water than thyme. So it's flat, you don't have to mow it. And in the springtime, it has these little white bracts, not flowers, but bracts, which add some color in the springtime to it. It's a really, really tough plant. I've grown it for years, and it does spread. And so I think you're probably going to have to mail order it, but it's well worth the effort. It's something really interesting to have. So there are a ton of other xeric ground covers out there. And what I wanted to point out is that there's a link on the Durango Botanic Gardens site from which you click this presentation. You can download a PDF, and the PDF has some really, really good information on it. Not only all the plants that I talk about in this presentation are mentioned on this first page, but here's the cool thing. You get 62 xeric ground covers that were time tested by Michael Bronner up at Harlequin's Gardens up in Boulder. He created some test beds and wanted to know what are better ground covers other than Kentucky bluegrass. So he divided and found that they divided in half. Some of these ground covers only take half of the water of Kentucky bluegrass, and some of them only a quarter of the water of Kentucky bluegrass. So this particular 5 pages, 6 pages actually, has a listing of all these great, great ground covers and how they perform. And the nice thing about it is it's got some description that I thank Michael for allowing us to use. And I put in a couple of symbols on that. The square ones say that's growing in my garden. If you want to see what any of these things look like, sure, come on over. We'll take a look at it. And also that icon that looks like a bunch of sheets of paper, that indicates that it's growing in the Durango Botanic Gardens at the library. So what you can do is you can see what these plants look like and how they're growing and what they look like in a natural state before you take the plunge and saying, that's a ground cover that I want to grow. And the final thing is here, when we talk about the horizontal rock garden, here's a list of all the plants that are growing between the flagstones and the plants that are flanking that particular garden. So it's stuff that grows pretty well. I just wanted to just let you know that you don't have to take notes on this. All that stuff's in the PDF. What I would ask is if you want to replace your bluegrass lawn, please don't use plastic astroturf. The reason being is that it's plastic and it smothers the plant. Now, water can go through fake turf, but nutrients can't. So all the leaves and all the stuff that the periphery of your plants are depending on, it's going to be excluded because you're basically spreading a perforated thick plastic saran wrap over your yard, and it fools no one. And instead of getting a mower, you're gonna have to get a vacuum cleaner. So just why are you doing this? It's expensive. In the 10 years, it's all going to fall apart. You got to tear it up, and then you're going to have to throw it in the trash and replace it again. Whereas if you had grasses or ground covers or xeric perennials, they will regenerate themselves. No plastic, please. It's a bummer. Probably something even worse is folks that pave over things and then paint it green. Sorry, folks, this is right in front of the United Methodist thrift store, and seeing how the roots of nearby trees are pushing up the asphalt, desperately looking for moisture and nutrients. It fools no one. It looks pretty awful. So, hint, hint, maybe the Methodist thrift store could reconsider and rethink how they deal with how they present themselves on East Second Avenue. The most eccentric way to replace your bluegrass lawn is to put in a bunch of red-headed gnomes. This actually occurs. I don't know what to say. It's really wild. It is eccentric, but the gnomes don't require water. So who am I to say that this is not a good strategy? If you are going to be starting these projects, folks, think big, start small. have some wins. So everybody has these strips of lawn in front of the street or between, a sidewalk or a wall or something like that. Go ahead and remove the grass there and plant some things and let it grow. Let the stuff fill in. You can do it on a small scale, a couple feet deep here, a couple feet wide, and you can fill it in relatively quickly. And you're going to see this amazing transformation, and it'll provide all this year-round beauty. I think that's pretty cool. Start small. That's going to be the key. But if you want to dream big and you want to go big, here's something that I did at the house. And that is when we bought the place with this ugly, weedy, useless grass side yard, is what I called it. You know, Nothing's good there. We're not going to use it for anything. Let's just use it for gardens. So I dug out all the grass. I dug it out by hand with a digging fork. You dig it and then you just kind of pound it, get all the soil out of it, and then compost these big hunks of oh, it was bluegrass, it was crabgrass, Timothy grass, all sorts of these orchard things. It was just all nasty. Um, Took a couple weekends, but it was well worth the effort. You can see the after of what happened a couple of years later, so it's well worth your effort. What I did was I dug out the grass and I laid down flagstone. Notice I didn't create a bed or anything like that. I just put the flagstone on the soil that's been leveled, and then I just leveled the flagstone. If you're going to do this, use really honking big pieces of flagstone and make sure that the margin between each flagstone is about 2.5, 3, maybe 4 inches, because you're going to want to put plants in it. So that's what I did. After I put down the flagstone, I started putting plants down, and then I gravel mulch between them, and that was the fun part. A couple of hundred plants. Just loved these little things, and it just grew great. And then 2 years later, it turned into this beautiful, beautiful place with a crevice garden on the side and a horizontal rock garden. It's a lot of fun. If you want to do that, it is going to require work, but it is very much worth it. But if you really want to go massive, I think dream huge and go huge the way that Pete and Tish Varney did. So their home up at Forest Avenue, what you see here on a before picture, had a huge, just a honking huge thing of grass in front with two trees. And Pete and Tish said, what are we doing with all this grass? We don't use it for anything. And so they went at it big time. They marked it out, and notice it kind of looks like like a body. They chalk out the body marks and stuff. So they marked it out. They knew what they were going to do, and then what they did is they nuked all the grass. They had that removed. They burned things. They brought in a ton of rocks, and I think Eric Lewis from Canyon Landscape did the rock work on this. And so this is what it looks like after all the heavy equipment came through and the rock placement. What a transformation. But it gets even better. And here's what it looks like. And then they started planting, Pete and Tish did. So look at that. Wow, that's a front yard. A bunch of grass used to grow there. And now you've got this. But there's a hidden treasure on this. And I think this is the epitome of what you should do to your front lawn. They have a meeting area. They established a patio that's surrounded by all these beautiful, beautiful plants. Your front lawn is now a welcoming meeting area, as opposed to this green thing that people have to trundle over to get to your front door. Isn't this a great way to greet guests? And look at that. You've got partridge feather, you've got sambuca, you've got all these wonderful plants, plus planters and Enothera that's growing there. Wow, this is really, really cool. And this is the what I think is the best example of a real transformation, just not killing the plants, but transforming your front bluegrass lawn into a brand new outdoor meeting room. I think that's awful cool. This is what it looked like before. Which do you think is the nicer place? Wow. Way to go, Pete and Tish. That's what I've got for you. You don't need to have big lawns. Think about reducing it. Think about changing your relationship with it. Think about replacing it. You'll have fun. You'll do the earth good. and I think you'll create a verdant and much better yard.